Welcome to the ITFreeTraining video on Windows Server 2012 install requirements. This video will look at minimum requirements to install Windows Server 2012 and also look at some recommended requirements to get optimal performance out of your Windows Server 2012 installation. In order to install Windows Server 2012, you need to meet the following hardware requirements. You require a 1.4 GHz 64-bit processor, 512 megabytes of RAM, and 32 gigabytes of available hard disk space. These requirements are very low and are enough to install Windows Server 2012 and not much else. It should be pointed out that Microsoft refers to these requirements as install requirements rather than minimum requirements, as they did in previous operating systems, and these are effectively what they are. The requirements will allow you to install Windows Server 2012, but if you start adding roles or additional applications, the performance of the server will quickly reduce. If you attempt to install Windows Server 2012 on a computer that does not meet these requirements, the install may fail, and if it does succeed, you will not have the best user experience using Windows Server 2012, even for basic operations. It should also be pointed out that if you attempt to install Windows Server 2012 Essentials, it will not install without a working network card. The network card must not only be present, Windows must also have drivers for it. If Windows does not have drivers, you can supply your own, but if Windows Essentials cannot detect and install a network card, the install will stop and you will not be able to continue until you supply these drivers or install a working network card. When this video was created, Microsoft had not released recommended hardware requirements for Windows Server 2012, except for the Essential Edition of Windows Server 2012. For the Essential Edition, as shown, the requirements are much the same for CPU. For the RAM, this jumps to 2 gigabytes. During our testing of Windows Server 2012, 2 gigabytes seemed like a good starting point for RAM to use basic features in Windows Server 2012, and allows adding some roles like Active Directory. In our testing of systems with 1 gigabyte, this was not enough RAM when you start adding some roles to the server and start putting the server under some load. It ultimately depends on what you will use the server for to determine how much RAM that you will need. For the Essential Edition, Microsoft recommended 160 gigabytes of hard disk and, if possible, 60 gigabytes of that used for the system partitions. In other words, a 60 gigabyte partition just for the operating system. You can see that the install requirements will get Windows Server 2012 up and running, but in the real world, you will want more than this if you want to do anything other than install Windows Server 2012. Microsoft also gives some optional requirements. Although none of these is required to install Windows Server 2012, Microsoft suggests that it's a good idea to meet these requirements in order to get the performance out of Windows Server 2012. First, they recommend a DVD drive. The Windows Server 2012 media is available on DVD, however, can also be installed from other media like a USB drive. For this reason, you may be able to install Windows Server 2012 quite effectively without having to ever use the DVD drive, not even during the install. The next requirement is a Super VGA or higher monitor. This essentially means a monitor that can support 800 by 600 or higher. In the case of servers, and particularly if your company has a lot of servers, most of the administration nowadays will be performed from remote, so in a lot of cases, the administrator may rarely visit the server and use it physically. The monitor may only be required for the initial install and configuration. The next requirement is a keyboard and mouse. Once again, nowadays it is possible to perform all administration from remote. In some cases, the administrator may only use the keyboard and mouse during install time. If you do decide to do this, ensure that your BIOS is configured to continue booting without a keyboard. Many BIOSes will generate an error on boot and pause if no keyboard is connected to the computer. To ensure your computer will always boot, make sure the BIOS is configured to continue the boot process without a keyboard. The last requirement is Internet access. In some cases, your server may be on a secure network and not have a direct connection to the Internet. Windows Server 2012 will still work without Internet access. However, some features require Internet access, for example, to download updates. In a lot of cases, there are workarounds which you can use to get around not having direct Internet access for the server. Well, this covers the basic requirements for Windows Server 2012. You can see that the requirements are quite low, and with the price of hardware nowadays, you will be able to purchase a server quite easily that will exceed these recommendations. As always, thanks for watching this video from ITFreeTraining. For the latest videos, please consider subscribing to us on YouTube. Thanks, and see you next time.